Sometimes I miss my ignorance. When I was young, I would attend Sunday school, and instead of exploring ideas, I would be told defenses of what we as a church believed. And it felt good. Adults would cheer you on as you learned to quote the Bible verses out of context and recite the apologetics that they really wanted you to learn. Ultimately, authentic learning requires one questioning one's own belief, including one's faith. As I started to question everything, as the Bible does, in fact, say to do in 1 Thessalonians 5:21, I was met with accusations of arrogance, of trying to make myself my own God, or of giving into sin by not towing the party line. This was all before I even deconverted. I was still a believer at this time, thinking that I was just looking for a more pure version of belief. The community became ugly, but even now, I miss aspects of Sunday mornings when everyone would put on their best clothes and kindliest smiles and choose to ignore reality together. The path I'm on now, one of earnestly and honestly seeking truth, is much harder. And even though I miss the simplicity of fake smiles on Sunday morning, I would rather face reality with all of its difficulty than waste my entire one life living in a dream. Are you an atheist who misses the church? An apostate who totally doesn't agree with anything I'm saying? Or a member of a faith that thinks my use of the word truth here is totally satanic? No matter what, give us a call because the show is starting now. Welcome, everyone. Today is February 2nd, 2025. I am your host, Sofia Spina, and joining me is the wonderful, lovely co-host, Christy Powell.
Howdy.
Hello.
Yeah,
Welcome.
excited to be doing this with you.
Yeah, we've never actually hosted a show before.
No, yeah, been waiting for it. Glad to be here.
Oh, sorry. You can continue and tell me how awesome I am and how much you've wanted to host the show with me.
Come on. That's how all great podcasts start, really, is just by the host talking about how wonderful they both are. But yeah, I am excited to be doing this. I'm excited to hear from some wonderful callers today, really.
Yes, give us a call. I mean, as I said in the whole intro thing, but seriously, we actually like talking to y'all, and I think we're both pretty nice people, Yeah. So Talk Heathen is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. As Chrissy just mentioned, we have callers. Talk Heathen is a live call-in show, and we have open lines. So get your calls in at 512-991-9242, or you can call from your computer. Easy peasy at tiny.cc/callth. That's tiny.cc/callth. As you can see also at the bottom of the screen, it's there the whole time. If you're watching, you can just look and be like, oh, how do I call in? It's there right at the bottom of the screen. So yeah, no reason not to.
People get salty in the chat sometimes, and they forget that the information to call is right there where they're typing. So could bring it. Let's talk it through in front of the real audience.
Exactly. Don't hide your light under a bushel, guys. Come on. A great way to support us also, if you're calling and you're a fan, is by sending us super chats. Speaking of the chat, just do a super chat. If we get, we didn't even discuss super chat challenge, but I'm going to go ahead and throw one out here. If we get 10 super chats for $5 or the equivalent monetarily, I feel like we can say, then I sort of used to sing, so I will sing you something. I will give that out there if that is an incentive at all. It's not a very exciting incentive.
However you feel about that idea, please send in your super chats.
Exactly. If you think I'm going to be terrible and you hate us, send in a super chat so you can see me embarrass myself. That's also a good plan. I've been working on an atheist playlist, so you can expect some exciting atheist jams. So we always have a question of the week, which we call Talk Heathen to Me. And so it is time for our Talk Heathen to Me segment here at the top of the show. So last week we asked you, a lesser known tree in the Garden of Eden is the tree of blank. And Christy, do you want to read our top 3 answers?
Yeah, let's hit those. Last week we heard in our number 3 slot from James West, who said a lesser known tree in the Garden of Eden, the dollar tree.
I
Wah,
love it.
wah.
And they say dollars don't grow on trees.
Aw.
Ah.
Number 2 came from Laren Misha, who said, what additional trees were there in the garden? The tree of fruit that kept Adam amused before Eve came along.
Oh my! Spicy fruits.
Yeah, they didn't even have a microwave.
You don't know that. You weren't there.
Yeah. And our number 1 favorite this week came from Post saying the tree of bullshit, which they then pulped to make paper for making Bibles.
Aw.
See
I like
where you went there.
the premise that you can just like touch a kind of paper and tell whether or not what's written on it is going to be bullshit. Like, what is, that sounds icky, actually, now that I say it. Anyway, the prompt for next week is complete the sentence. It's a bad idea to follow the Bible's command of blank. What's your, well, first I'll tell people how to answer that. Enter your best answer below in the comments, and next week we will reveal the top 3 answers. Before we do that, though, Christy, complete the sentence.
You know, credit where it's due. This actually came from a ChatGPT session, but I dig it, so I'm bringing it in. It's a bad idea to follow the Bible's command of literally interpreting every passage without considering historical context, cultural background, or ethical implications. This approach can lead to misunderstandings or harmful practices that don't align with values of justice, compassion, and human rights. Even the robots get it. Even the robots get it, right?
I know. And I do feel like there is something that robot is missing, which is that every religious person is actually seeking to be aligned with values of justice and human rights. So
one should hope.
Yeah. It's still living the dream, believing that people are really seeking what they preach. Mm-hmm. But I do love that answer. It's more optimistic than I am apparently today. Dang, I'm a negative Nancy.
You know, it's not as snarky, but it's the baseline of what I would really like to hope we are all sort of working towards. I'd like to think that people who do believe in the Bible in a very literalist way are still wanting values of justice, compassion, and human rights, and are willing to examine that historical context, the cultural backgrounds, and the real-life ethical implications of following a, slave-owning genocidist, and, some of the other things that the God of the Bible can be described as.
I feel like you've just given the best, you should call in kind of
spiel
right there. That's amazing. So yeah, I'm anxious to see what our audience comes up with next week. In the comments section, give us your best answer and tune in next week when we reveal our top 3. Mm-hmm. So real quick, before we take our first call, we are going to go to the crew cam to thank the video and audio people, moderators, notes and timestamps folks. There they are.
Wonderful, hardworking folks. Thank y'all for everything.
We've got some Talk Heathen swag going on there too. Love that. That's amazing. I love the little pop-in at the end. So we did get to see everybody for a brief moment. But seriously, we are, we're the hosts. We are so not the majority of the people who do work on this. They do so much. Everything you see, all of these cool little bells and whistles going on. The fact that you can call in and that this seems pretty smooth. Even the script that I'm kind of going from to make sure we hit all these points, that is all not us. That is all the folks behind the scenes. So yeah, we just appreciate them.
For sure. Grateful for their hard work.
Yeah. All right. We have a caller.
Sure. You ready to jump in? Let's do it.
I am stoked. All right. So we are going to start with Thomas or Tomas. I am not sure. Tomas. So definitely correct me if I have said that incorrectly. From Portugal. So Thomas says, I used to be an atheist, majored in philosophy, and is currently studying hard sciences. Christianity is sophisticated philosophically, rationally, and morally. All right. So
let's talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What's your, tell us about your thoughts there, Thomas/Tomas. Can you hear me, bud? It's looking like I should be able to hear you. Well, I definitely do want to hear your argument. I'm not hearing it come through. You hearing anything, Christy?
No, afraid not. We may have to pop them back in the
Okay.
queue, get that sorted out, and come back.
Yes. So definitely don't hang up, please. Let's get that sorted out. Instead, we're going to start with Clark then, I suppose. So hopefully we can hear Clark. So Clark goes by he, him, is from New York, and says the argument they have an argument for the existence of God, the divine conceptualist argument. All right, Clark, you're on. Tell us about the divine conceptualist argument.
Yeah, so the divine conceptualist argument is establishing the necessity of propositions. And the idea is that if propositions exist necessarily, then an essential attribute of any proposition is going to be that it has an aboutness relation, which means it has some property of intentionality. And that would be analytically identical to mental content or mind. So the idea is that if there are necessarily existing propositions, then there's going to be a necessarily existing mind. And I can give you the deductive argument that establishes the truth of this proposition.
Let's start with a rephrase just so that I'm sure that I'm understanding what you're saying, okay? Sound good?
Okay.
So you're saying that the existence of a proposition, like anybody saying that a thing is true, requires a mind. Is that accurate? I'm sure that that's simplifying a little bit.
No, I'm saying that the existence of a proposition is identical to a mind. And it wouldn't just be one proposition, it would be all propositions that are necessary.
Okay. What does a proposition mean in this sense?
A proposition is going to be a declarative statement that has truth values. Now, I'm making a claim that certain propositions are going to be necessary, not that all propositions are going to be necessary, but all of the propositions that are necessary are going to be identical to a mind.
So what is, I'm kind of confused, identical to a mind, like a thinking, feeling, entity? Is that what you're saying? It's because that's my interpretation of a mind, and that a proposition would then be identical to, or a group of propositions would be identical to like a thinking, feeling entity. Is that kind of what you're saying, or am I not understanding what you mean by mind here?
So yeah, that would be a sufficient condition for a mind, that it is thinking and feeling. But I think a necessary condition, and the one I'm pointing to, is going to be intentionality, which is just going to be that property of aboutness that is going to be a necessary feature of any mind, but it's also going to be a necessary feature of any necessary proposition. So that's what the argument is establishing, that these necessary propositions are identical to a necessary mind.
So there must be a thinking and feeling thing, and by the existence of that thinking and feeling thing, it must be intentional?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there must be a necessarily existing proposition, and in virtue of there being a necessarily existing proposition, and an essential attribute of that necessarily existing proposition is going to be intentionality, which is analytically identical to a mental state, because that would be a necessary feature of any mental state as well, would be intentionality. So it's just an abductive inference that I'm making there in virtue of those same essential attributes that are present in both the proposition that is necessary and any mental state.
To be honest, this is a bit word salady. So I'm going to just ask the first most obvious question. Why is a proposition necessarily existent? Why must any proposition exist?
So again, I'm not saying that all propositions are necessary. I'm saying that there is at least one necessary proposition. And the reason why it's necessary is because the negation of the proposition would entail a contradiction. I'm talking about logical necessity. So an example of a necessary proposition would be a ball can't be fully red and fully blue, because it's analytically identical that what it means for a ball to be fully red is that it excludes it from being fully blue. And same as it being fully blue would exclude it from being fully red. That's the predicate concept of that proposition. So that means in all
so you're saying that because
that proposition is true.
Yeah, a thing exists and is true, propositions are necessary?
No. Again, I gave you an example of a necessary proposition because it's a type of proposition that cannot not be true. It's true in all possible worlds because the negation of the proposition entails a contradiction, which is a conjunction of two propositions that evaluates to false in all possible worlds. This is basic logic.
Oh, so I must be so dumb. Hey, Christy, can you make something out of this?
Yeah, I mean, sure. What I'm sort of understanding, Clark, is that because, for instance, like numbers exist and they're consistent and they seem to be universal, there has to be some sort of underlying source code underpinning the universe to keep all of that straight, to make all of that happen. Because we can acknowledge that these essential propositions exist, that necessarily there must be some sort of mind, some sort of will holding it together. Is that at all fair?
No, that's a complete straw man of my argument, actually.
Okay, I'm going to actually read your argument as I find it online. I'm going to mute you for a second because you're starting to fall into like accusations about us that, oh, this is basic logic, that's a straw man. We're genuinely engaging in this with good faith and trying very hard to understand what you're saying. So I've looked up.
It seems like a justification for like the first part of the kalam, like this notion of mind.
Yeah, so I actually looked up the divine conceptualist argument for God's existence from necessary truth. And there are, I'm not going to go through every single premise, but I'm going to start just with the description of mind, and then we can come back in and see like what you think of that, okay? So I muted you for a second. I'm going to unmute you now, but I'm going to have you, listen to this bit. All right. And we're not going to do name calling and accusations. All right. Because we really are trying to understand this. So what I'm seeing here, premise 1, there are necessary truths. First off, it has the premise that, and that's kind of, it feels like what you were describing about saying a ball is red or it is blue. Cats are mammals, triangles have 3 sides. These are described as necessary truths, which are true in all possible situations, or to use world semantics is what this says, true in all possible worlds. So we're just assuming there are necessary truths. Premise 2, truth is a property of propositions which are inherently intentional. That is, they are about whether some state of affairs, this says obtains or not. And the way that I would kind of process that is that, like, if we're making a proposition that is based on a necessary truth, then we're being intentional about doing that. And those things must have come into existence with some intentionality. And then premise 3 kind of goes with this. Inherently intentional propositions are best understood as thoughts. So if something is inherently intentional, then it would be purposeful and could be understood as a thought. And premise 4 is that thoughts require a mind. Leading to premise 5, necessary truths exist as thoughts or a mind of minds. All right. So with it being stated that way, is that kind of what we're trying to get at here, Clark?
It's a very similar argument. I would accept using that argument because it's very similar to mine, but I want to clear up some few important points of clarification. So number 1, it's not assumed that there are necessary truths. It's deduced. It is the case that there are necessary truths in virtue of the argument that you just read being sound, meaning that it's logically valid and the premises are true. So premise 1 would have a hidden premise, meaning there'd be a separate argument for the claim that there are necessary truths. It's not just assumed. And also,
yeah, I think for the purpose of this argument, that's how a premise works, though. Okay.
Me?
I think for the purpose of this argument, we're assuming that to go forward. I'm not declaring that it is assumed in all situations, but that's what a premise sort of is that we're operating as though these are true for the purpose of this argument, right? So from my perspective, we're assuming it to continue with this conversation. That's why I would use that terminology.
Yeah, so it's not going to be the case that for all logical arguments, the premises that are contained within the form of each logical argument are going to be assumed. I just don't take that to be the case. But
okay, I never said that, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, let's go to the next thing you were saying.
It's not the case that premise 1 is assumed. Yeah, so the obtained there is meant to be referring to it being actualized in some possible world. This is why it's important to have philosophical training if you're going to engage with a formal argument. Because these are very technical philosophical terms, right? So you need to be able to...
So not basic logic.
Yeah, I thought you said it was basic logic.
It is basic logic, but it's clear you don't know basic logic, right? This is modal logic. It's very easy to understand, and the implications are very clear.
Let's have a quick chat. I'm going to mute you again, because we're struggling to talk like a person here. You have no idea if I have any training in basic logic or not. It is entirely possible that I have quite a bit, but because I don't agree with you, we're coming out with this, you clearly don't understand this is basic logic kind of thing. That's just getting nasty. And I don't have any real interest in nastiness. Like I said, we're engaging in this best we can, trying to understand. It was a little cheeky for me to say, I thought you said this was all basic logic, but it's a little hard to engage in a logical argument where someone is saying this is basic and you must understand these complex terms and have training to engage in it. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to this idea that if something is true and it's something that should seem basic to understand, should be pretty basic to discuss. So this is the second time I've muted you. I'm going to do a 3 strikes you're out thing here. I am actually enjoying engaging with this idea, and I would like to continue enjoying you. But let's try that again. So we're just looking at you, what argument you are making here, and all I was trying to do here was get to the idea and the definition of a mind. So looking at propositions being something that are intentional because they have to be something that is understood. They basically they require a mind. Necessary truths exist as thoughts or a mind of minds. Can we even get that far?
Sure. I think we need to clarify what you think intentionality means there, because it seems like you don't understand what intentionality is referring to. It's not a dig on you, but it's just a point of
that was fine. I think you might be right. Let's clarify that.
Yeah, intentionality is referring to a property of aboutness, which specifically is a relational property because it's normative, which means that it's irreducible. Are you following that?
So, aboutness. I've never encountered this term. Tell me about it.
So I just explained that to you. So yeah, the property of aboutness is going to be referring to a relational property, which in philosophy, all relational properties are non-monadic predicates. Do you know the distinction between a predicate and a property?
Again, we're getting towards salad. So I think that I'm going to say the Einstein thing.
You're just not equipped.
If you cannot explain it to a 5th grader, you don't understand it. We're going to go the Einstein route. Okay. So let's go with that route. You're already treating me a little like I'm dumb. So treat me like I'm real dumb. How do you say this to a real dumb person?
I'm sure that this is a piece of meaningful philosophy that is probably worth engaging in. It's not one that I'm familiar with or particularly well equipped to dive into without a little bit more explanation, but I'm also sure that guy's being an ass. That's not cool.
So I actually am genuinely curious, and I find that to be sort of we have Richard popping up in here. Hey, Richard. I get the sense that you have some
Can you walk us through that at all? Can you steelman what he was trying to express?
I have never, ever once in the history of this show asked to be brought up when two other hosts are hosting the show. So this is a first. First of all, Clark, you don't insult my hosts, ever. That is the last thing you want to do. Secondly, I'm obviously you can't address this now because you're not here, but there's a couple of things I want to point out. Conceptualism was brought up originally as a kind of argument against Platonism, which ironically influenced all of the early Christian thinkers and a lot of early Christian theology, and a lot of the people who argue against conceptualism are Christian philosophers. So I'd like to hear, if we ever get the opportunity to hear from you again, what your response to the Christian philosophers who disagree with conceptualism are. Secondly speaking, you made the
concern there, the distinction there is rather than Plato's ideal forms and this whole world, that we have this thinking mind that kind of underwrites the universe. That's not too terribly far off.
Yeah, in Platonism, for those who don't know, things like circles, there is a realm where circles exist. A perfect circle exists, and all the circles on Earth are imperfect. They are just reflections of that perfect one. And this idea of conceptualism, this divine conceptualism, is that realm does not exist. that Platonic realm does not exist, and these ideas actually come from God instead of that perfect realm. Secondly, he made a very, very interesting remark about blue cannot be blue and cannot be red at the same time. That is a contradiction. I absolutely agree. And with that statement, sir, you disproved Christianity, because a full human being, a person who is fully human, cannot be fully God at the same time. That is a contradiction. So if you're going to be a clever arse and start accusing my horse of being philosophically illiterate, you might want to do a bit more study yourself first before you do that. If you ever come back on again, if I decide to let
acknowledging, my own ignorances in the areas of this field that I'm not particularly well versed in, and logic is actually one of those things. We don't have to be rude about it, but I'll cop to that. I really will. But you don't get to come in and, insulting us, like, whatever. Yeah. You don't get to use slurs on air. And that's something that I don't want to repeat, but I also want to really establish that is that's going to be an important part of our philosophy moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to jump out. I'm going to hand the show back to you. I just felt the need to. I really wanted to say that. I'm going to jump out now. Bye.
I love the
Thank you, Richard.
The ire. I also always feel like, like dad just came on and scolded somebody a little bit, like sort of that vibe. Which I personally don't mind. You can hear Richard there laughing in the background. But so I honestly think that the disappointing part about conversations like that is that if it reminds me, there have been other callers that kind of do this as well, that they heard an argument and it felt like it resonated to them, but we're the first people it feels like they're trying to explain it to. And so from their perspective, it feels this really self-evident, really obvious. And then there's frustration when they're not able to communicate it very well. And so I would say that I absolutely could do better in understanding philosophy in general. I have done quite a bit of training formally and otherwise in logic. That was something that I have enjoyed. And, I kind of am okay with just you don't know my background, but if you're going to treat me like I'm stupid, just tell it to me like I am as stupid as you.
Just talk to me like I'm stupid. Yeah.
That's okay.
Show don't tell.
I'm not blonde anymore, but I can do the whole bimbo thing. It's fine. If that's what you need to make your argument and you make your case, I'll help you out with that. So, it is interesting. I think I want to put out there too that kind of conversation is one that I didn't leave Christianity because of it, but I did leave the church because I was really tired of men word vomiting on me and then acting like I'm stupid for not understanding it. And that it is because the Bible must be right about how women need this lesser role because I don't understand the word vomit that they're giving me. I think that it was almost a little bit, it's the first time on this show I felt a little bit actually mad. And I think that that's sort of interesting for me because
I'm so glad I got to be here for this.
I know. It's nice you're a therapist. I'll just tell you about it. But it was interesting because I'm wow, this is not, I don't get the sense that they're the worst person. I think they got frustrated, but I think they genuinely want to engage with these ideas. But it felt so much like every philosophical Christian fuckboy that wanted to tell me how to live my life when I was younger, when I was a part of the church, and then blamed me for any disagreement I had because I was just wrong and they didn't want to deal with what that might have meant or take my opinion seriously. So for the record, I plan on looking up divine conceptualist arguments. I started Googling aboutness because I was all right, let's try and get into this a little bit. The first thing it says is that it's a hotly contested thing. So I'm okay, I don't feel that bad for not immediately climbing onto it. But I want to put out there for any audience member, that might have actually been a stressful call to listen to because for me, it was a stressful one to sort of experience in that way, I don't know if that's unique to women, but
well, I mean, particularly for folks who have been, in that same position, who have been talked down to and condescended to in those ways, in a environment where not understanding the argument or not, capitulating to it means that you're going to hell, or that you're a bad person, or that you're going to lose access to your community. It's very reasonable to get stirred up in all of that. So yeah, I appreciate you handling it with some grace and walking us through it. We've got a couple of super chats, if I can hit those before we jump on to our next call.
Do it.
Yeah.
Love it.
So Miranda Rensberger offers $10 and says, if you use a word that literally no one has heard, like aboutness, to define another word, then you are the one who is not equipped for the conversation. Always appreciate Miranda's feedback. Always appreciate the donation and the support. Another one from Shuburn Patil. I apologize if I have that a little bit off. She says, love to Christy, Sofia, Richard, and Talk Heathen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then £5 from...
rupees. That's an aside.
Yes. Oh, my mistake. And from Herbie Shine, please ask Sofia to stop moving. When she sits still, it looks like she has teddy bear ears. I wish Richard had spoken to Clark directly. That would have been a beatdown, no doubt.
I love it. I love the teddy bear ears. I have to sit up a little bit more. I'm on a couch. You can't see that, but so I have to actively sort of do it.
Align for it. Yeah, no, it is a good look.
There we go. I can sit forward with it. Yeah, that's a special treat for when you watch closely enough. You get to see my teddy bear ears. So stay tuned for teddy bear ears when they arrive. Yeah, also, absolutely, that's hilarious. The idea of Richard. Yeah, I mean, hey, that's the thing. Call back. Richard clearly wants to have this conversation. Call back when Richard is hosting, and maybe he will be your intellectual equal in a way that I just am not. Yeah, we just got another one there. Christy, do you want to read that one out?
Sure, yeah. Let's see. From Some Kind of Dickie, $10, saying, insults break down communication. If you find yourself insulting your discussion partner, that should be a red flag to you. Fair advice. Fair advice.
I definitely agree. I mean, I was a young person who sometimes would get overexcited, and I think we've all at some point done that whole ad hominem thing. Sure. I cannot say and would not say that I never have. But I think that it's something you learn as you grow up. In my brain, that's part of becoming adult and taking accountability for my own feelings and emotions and arguments, is that I learn not to do that. And I get in touch with why I'm getting so riled up. So hopefully, you can get there, Clark. I believe in you. Or I'm choosing to believe in you anyway. All right. So now we have some real quick announcements before we get back to calls. It looks like we actually do have Tomas back on the line. So I'm excited to be able to talk with Tomas. So here we have got some exciting news, and it's pretty funny because I'm in this announcement that is going to play. So I'm going to go along with what it says here, which is, all right, we're going to get right back into calls. But first, we have some exciting news. Sofia is going to be
all free thinkers.
There we go.
We are excited to announce that the ACA is launching its first ever fundraising campaign, Amplify ACA, in partnership with Amplify Austin. This is your chance to expand our impact by making your voices heard and supporting the shows that you love.
We invite you to join us on March 5th starting at 6 p.m. We're going to be doing a 24-hour fundraising event and camp out live at the Free Thought Library in Austin, Texas. We've got a great show in the works, a whole variety hour with our hosts doing different things, not just taking calls like you're used to, but we're going to have the fun facts and playing some games and lots of different activities. So be sure to join us from that. Again, it's going to be really exciting, and we're looking forward to having as many people involved as we possibly can.
Donating is easy on amplifyatx.org. Just search the word atheist. We're the only ones that will come up. And click the donate button. Follow us on our socials for more information.
And this is important. We want to be able to amplify the voices of reason and compassion worldwide. So we ask you, please, donate on Amplify Austin Day to make a real difference.
Yay! Thank
Beautiful
you,
work.
Ben, Sofia, and Jamie. So as they were this is very confusing. I'm having an identity crisis here. We're discussing, this is our first ever major fundraising campaign, and we need you, yes, you, person watching, to help make it a success. So mark your calendars for March 5th at 6 p.m. for our fundraising kickoff party and 24-hour live stream. We're really going to be there the whole time. It's exciting. Come on down to the Free Thought Library if you're in Austin, and join us online via the Atheist Experience channel. Make a plan to donate, and let's amplify the ACA together. So I do want to add a note, like I've been part of some of these brainstorming sessions for it. I am actually really excited. It's weird to be excited for a fundraising thing genuinely, but I think it will actually be really fun. Yeah, you'll definitely see me, some really cool guests from around the Austin area, some really cool folks who are hosts if you want to see them do something that isn't just like hosting, maybe something a little silly sometimes, or a special performance. I think it's going to be really cool. And if you're in the area, come like play games, hang out, you can meet the Spinas. There's a few of us around. So I feel like there should just be a show with like meet the Spinas. Yeah. So I genuinely like it says March 5th at 6 p.m. That's a Wednesday. I'm pretty sure. Let me double check that actually really quick. I am pretty sure it's a Wednesday. Yes, it is a Wednesday, March 5th. I think it'll actually be great. Other ways you can donate if you are just so ready to donate. You're like, I cannot wait for Amplify Austin. I want to donate now. You can become a channel member. Click the join button below the video. You'll get custom chat emotes, early access to clips and shorts, and you will help perpetuate the mission of Talk Heathen and the Atheist Community of Austin. Another way to support us is by sending super chats. Send them in. We'll read as many as we can. And we've actually had like quite a few already. I feel like Clark excited something in the audience, which is sort of exciting. Thanks for making us money, Clark. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel, enable notifications, and comment below on your favorite caller or your favorite color, and just tell us how your day's going. Like, come on, whatever you want to talk about, let us know. We also have merch. Get your Talk Heathen merch at tiny.cc/merchaca. That's tiny.cc/merch, MERCHACA. We have tees, sweatshirts, hoodies, hats, pint glasses, mugs, onesies. Yeah, there's just all sorts of exciting things there. So after all of that, we can return to calls. We've got, I'm excited that it looks like we have Tomas back. Tomas, from Portugal. Just a reminder, used to be an atheist, majored in philosophy, and is currently studying hard sciences. And they argue that Christianity is sophisticated philosophically, rationally, and morally. All right. So, Thomas.
Hello.
Hello. First of all, tell me how to say your name correctly.
So my name, I'm Portuguese. My name is Tomas. But if Thomas is easier for you, that's fine.
No, I wanted to say it right. So, Tomas, let's go. Tell us about your conclusions about Christianity.
There is the summary there. I also, on behalf of people who have majored in philosophy, I apologize for the attitude of the previous caller. You don't assume they're all like that.
I know you're not all like that, but I appreciate that.
I've met enough of them like that, but you're right.
Yeah. But thank you for that.
And it honestly make me more relaxed because I saw how kind and patient you were, even towards someone who had that sort of attitude. So, this is my first time calling to one of these shows. And I get that we're talking about important stuff. Some of it is just X's and O's on paper as we go through syllogisms and things, but really we're getting at big questions. Why are we here? What does any of it mean? What are we supposed to do with our life? And I appreciate some of that stuff can be really tender, especially since it sounds, Tomas, like you have had some like personal experiences of changing and developing your beliefs about the world. So what should we understand about that? What can you maybe offer to our audience about perhaps how they ought to see the world? Firstly, I'm aware a lot of people haven't had the best experience with Christians, and understandably their views of Christianity are rather negative. I would like to give them a more positive view. I believe you can be faithful to Christianity and to the Christian tradition and not have to, be incoherent or deny science or believe in morally repugnant things.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's living in the US, there's sometimes a bit of it feels as though there is this requirement amongst some sects of American Christianity where it's this idea that you have to toe this really strong party line that is very anti-scientific and anti-intellectual. And I think that I appreciate anyone who isn't that kind of religious person, just being not just saying we're not all like that, but actually being public about it. Because I think sometimes it feels like we're out there saying this is all madness, right? And there are some Christians I think are hesitant to criticize that movement that we've been seeing a lot in the US lately. So I do appreciate that. And not to assume everyone's familiar with American politics, but also it's made some news lately.
I'm too familiar with it.
Well, so if it's possible to believe in a, I guess a moral version of Christianity, or I think you used the term maybe to honor the Christian tradition. Okay, I'm interested and curious to understand how. I think that you definitely have to abandon any sense of biblical literalism or biblical inerrancy in order to achieve that. Can we start there? Is the Bible true or accurate, or what do you make of the Bible?
So I absolutely agree with the first part of what you said. And one of my goals, maybe coming here, was to dispel this fantasy notion that some fundamentalists have somehow convinced everyone of, which is that the Christian tradition is literalist about the Bible. It's absolutely not. And if you read, the church fathers, the people who built the intellectual foundations of the faith, they very rarely read the Bible literally, and it was just common and normal for many of them to recognize that. You had some of them be actually rather rude and say that you have to be an idiot to believe that the world was created in 6 days, as the first chapter of Genesis says. And this is not new. This is not some new development retreating from science in the last few centuries. It's, the retreat into literalism is a more modern development than what you find in the original faith.
So something that, because my background was a little bit more, as you could maybe tell from the cold open, it was a bit more fundamentalist in a lot of how people thought. Something I know they struggled with, or a lot of folks I went to church with struggled with, was the idea of if they were not going to take it literally, then it was going to rely too much on their own opinion, and they were flawed, so they had to take it literally. So as a person who knows it's not meant to be taken literally and knows the history of that a little bit, how do you approach that question of, how much do you rely on your own judgment? How much of the Bible do you take on its at face value? How do you approach that?
Oh, thank you. A great question. Firstly, some of those concerns are only real concerns since the Protestant Reformation. It is a rather recent development that you can expect the average Christian to be able to carry a Bible, in their pocket, in a language that they can read, that isn't just Latin or ancient Greek. For over a millennia, the Bible existed in a language most people couldn't read. There were few copies of it because you had to copy it by hand. And usually to have access to the Bible and to study it properly, you'd have to be part of the clergy. So you need to study, learn the languages, and really dive deep into the tradition of interpretation of the church. And the common person would, I'm not saying this was necessarily better because I don't want to be too elitist, but the average Christian would come into contact with the scriptures at Mass, during the service, through people who would hopefully be trained and be able to explain to them the messages that these stories are trying to convey. Now, to be more, to the point, for those people who are concerned, I understand the concern. Yes, we are flawed, but to take the Bible literally is not to get rid of your imperfections. You will always be imperfect. Everyone is.
Sure.
You should always strive to be better. I believe that the Bible, properly read in the context of the Christian tradition and using reason, I believe all of these things point in the same direction. You shouldn't find a contradiction between reasoning and what the Bible says, or between the Christian tradition and the Bible, or between the Christian tradition and reason. And if you do, you probably misunderstand one of them, or you aren't looking at it in the most productive way. I believe you should always try to harmonize all of the tools at your disposal, and they should all point to the same end.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely willing to acknowledge that the vast majority of Christian history has not included this idea of, biblical inerrancy, and that interpretation is part of it. And I'll also concede the notion that, if you are reading the Bible with a sense of reason and with a willingness to sort of interpret and to glean and to use your own wisdom and discernment to try and pull out the parts that maybe aren't as valuable or that no longer apply, or some of this, that you can get to some notions of truth, some value there. But I do have to start to ask, if the Bible isn't perfect, why are we reading it when there are so many better books out there? Like that, to me, it just comes down to a why would we keep up with it? Why would we hold on to it when there are so many other, ways to ascertain truth and moral reasoning and all of these things?
Well, so two things. Firstly, I wouldn't expect someone to just read the Bible and use their own individual reason to get at the truth, because again, we are limited. I would probably, if someone wants to engage with the Bible that way, the best way is to probably read it alongside commentaries by the church fathers. Very,
And I'm sorry if it seemed like I was leaning into the Bible specifically. Like I am more speaking, I guess, about the broader Christian tradition. If you have a wonderful priest or preacher or pastor who in your church is offering valuable lessons and community and all of these things, I think that that's wonderful. But could we base it on something that is maybe less problematic and brings less baggage to it than Christian history? Is that might be maybe a better, more straightforward version of the question I was looking to ask?
I mean, I believe we should not be rooted in the parts of, the particulars of the tradition that we recognize, we have sort of surpassed, obviously. But I don't think we should just get rid of all of it, because there is a lot of good stuff there.
So I guess that leads to
live within the best of the tradition.
Yeah. A question that, again, I'm kind of trying to think of this from my previous fundamentalist mindset too, is if you let go of literalism, it becomes a question of like, how much do you keep and how do you decide that? And I think the big question I have with that is there a literal hell? Is there something to be saved from? Because without the action of saving, without Christ's sacrifice, then I kind of wonder, do we end up saying, oh, it's a book of nice lessons, but not a lot more than that? Like, how much do you keep and how strictly do you hold to it?
Well, you keep to... I understand your question, but I believe the question you're asking is also itself influenced by your background.
Probably.
Christianity is not the religion of the Bible. The Bible is a collection of texts assembled by the church within the tradition and read by the church within the tradition. Being a Christian is about practicing your life, its religious dimension, within the traditions of the church. and it has always been part of the tradition of the church to have this sort of attitude towards the scriptures. But I can be more specific to try to be more helpful. Broadly, there has always been a division between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And this is obvious if you think about the perspective of people living in Jesus' time or in a few generations after, because one is a set of ancient scriptures, the other one is like contemporary testimonies from people. And the attitudes have always been very different. The Old Testament has always been taken as largely allegorical, the inheritance of the Old Testament by the Christian tradition. And if you read the Church Fathers, this is what they say, I'm not inventing things, that you read the stories to find and interpret in them the message that was revealed in Christ. Christianity is about Christ, it's about Jesus. And if you are reading the Old Testament as a book, either like a list of just rules to follow or some sort of historical record, you are not reading it to find the message of Christ. So you're not reading the Bible as like Christian scripture. Maybe you're reading it as an ancient Israelite, but that's the wrong way to do it.
So does it still hinge on... Oh, sorry. Do we still hinge on the fact of Christ's life, death, and resurrection?
Well, of course. I'm still a Christian. I'm not saying, just take the good moral lessons, but deny, yeah.
I guess I start to wonder, why can't that also be a metaphor then? Why can't that also be seen in a non-literal way?
Well, you could, but you'd be deviating pretty heavily from the Christian tradition.
That's true.
Or at least...
But then if I'm looking for kind of to follow truth best I can, then it's okay, in my opinion, to look for truth beyond just the Christian tradition, right? So if I'm looking for truth, like, am I going to land on Christ's birth, death, and resurrection? And do I have to land on that to be a Christian?
So two things. Firstly, you should absolutely look to every source of truth you can. I would never say that all truth is contained within the Christian tradition, or I would take the opposite and say, in a sense, all truth should be recognized by Christianity. If Christ is the light, the way, the truth, so all truth should be accepted by Christians. That's why to see, whether it comes from science or from other faiths, there are a lot of commonalities, and they can be recognized and appreciated. But this is something even the Pope recognizes.
Yeah. So I guess my question is... sorry, go ahead.
The end of your question, you said something about, it was about resurrection, and I forgot what you said. Can you just...
Yeah, I guess, to try to get to what I'm really trying to get at is that if we're saying that we don't need to take the Bible literally, do we still need to take Jesus' death and resurrection literally?
At what point do we distill it down to the bare bones? Like, what is it that we actually have to believe in? Is it the Apostles' Creed? Like, what is it that are the truly unifying and necessary ingredients? And, if we are sort of boiling off some other components, can we not agree that there might be better sources for those things that we, what we're holding on to ultimately?
Well, I would say, the resurrection is pretty central. If we were to make a list of the most essential things, it would be at the top, alongside something like the Trinity. But I guess, I'm a much more open-minded person maybe than a lot of Christians. I guess, depending on how it is done, maybe not from a strictly secular perspective, but if someone can find a sophisticated justification within the Christian tradition to view the resurrection in a different way, I could probably consider them a heterodox Christian. But it would still have to come from the place of Christianity. You know, you'd have to have Christian reasons to view it differently. Otherwise, you know, you are just a secular person who recognizes nice moral lessons in Christianity. And
Which
Yeah.
I guess
can
is
still
my
be good.
ultimate
It's not
goal.
being a Christian.
You know, I'm happier that.
Yeah. And I'd be curious to know, I might let you go here in a second, but you have been like a nice, like cold glass of water after our previous caller. So I appreciate
Certainly a
you
palate
and
cleanser. Yeah. And
what you're
I
bringing
do
so
appreciate where
much.
you're coming from. Yeah.
Yeah. But I would be curious to know, I almost want to, I'm wondering what that would look like to you, heterodox Christianity that doesn't necessarily affirm the literal resurrection of Christ. And you're mentioning looking at that from within the realm of Christian tradition. I don't necessarily know that, I know that that's maybe not your initial viewpoint, but I would be curious, maybe call back another time and like tell us about what that could look like. Or I get the sense that you think about things a lot, and I would like to know the progression of that thought process. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I would love to return and keep talking. I'm not sure if I can expect you to specifically, or if it like rotates every session, but I could certainly return.
Yeah, we do rotate, but you're lovely. So yeah.
I mean, there are specific movements within very early Christianity that, you know, mainstream Christianity eventually declared as heresies of Christians who viewed the resurrection and the nature of Jesus very differently for the first few centuries. If someone had reasons to like if they adhere to that sort of specific belief, and you know, in other aspects just try to keep within, you know, practicing as a Christian, then they would, you know, in my view, be a heterodox Christian, because the foundation of their beliefs is that specific, you know, early, now heretical Christianity, but it's still part of the history of the religion. But about taking the resurrection literally or not, we would also have to probably define what it means to take it literally, because I mean, a lot of Christians who you've probably met probably hold to a view of the literal resurrection that actually goes against what the New Testament says. I mean, if you read pretty much everything, but especially the letters of Paul, Christ did not rise in flesh and blood, because, you know, flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of the heavens, blah, blah, blah. Christ resurrected literally in pure spirit. This is what Paul says, like, you know, 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And, you know, just to clarify that even taking the resurrection literally does not necessarily mean taking it as a lot of, you know, fundamentalists do, who probably don't really even understand the texts that they are basing their faith on.
Yeah, you're probably right there. That makes sense. So I might let you go because we do have another person and some more announcements to do, but I just really appreciate you, and whether it's me or another person, definitely give us a call back. Thanks for calling.
Thank you very much.
I feel like I could actually have talked to Tomas all day in many ways, because I feel like there's always like a subsequent question that can be asked here. And I think it reminds me more of conversations I do have with some of my friends who remain part of Christianity, and ways that I'm like, but why? You know?
Right. Like you can be moral and believe in Christianity. You can be rational and believe in Christianity if we're going to define Christianity in such a way that accommodates all of this. And we can get there. Like I sincerely believe that you can. But it does raise the question you're talking about. Like, why do that? Is it the most reasonable? Is it the most likely truth that, yes, there was a man named Jesus who was raised from the dead, whether in spirit or, you know, why? Why would we get into all of this when we've already let go of so many of the like sort of reasons to become a Christian, you know, avoiding hell or some of these other ideas?
Yeah, I think I also, something I wonder, and this is totally an open-ended wonder. I don't have an answer to this question, but it is one that I actually ask my more progressive Christian friends, is that if you are still holding on to being a Christian, but you're viewing it through this framework, then are you perhaps holding on to more of it than you need to be, because you're still putting yourself in this headspace of Christian tradition. Are you perhaps still holding on to what are often oppressive structures that were part of the church for, millennia now, or trying to justify why they weren't so bad? I feel like I went through a more progressive Christian moment before I really was just like, I actually think if I let some of this go, it really all starts to fall apart for me. And that was a question I sort of asked myself, like, how much of this tradition itself can I even hold on to here? And once you're a part of the church, or like me, I went to Christian universities. So much of the structure of my life was bound up in it that I think I held on to it for longer because that structure was there, not because it fit more with the progressive Christianity that I was trying to hold on to.
Well, and these parts that we're holding on to, why has nobody else, why have not large-scale institutions started to call out the heresy of, some of this other bullshit? Like, why has it been allowed to commingle for, literally thousands of years without there being a much more like active and aggressive, violent even push back against some of these like anti-feminist ideals and some of these like manipulative, ideas around hell. And I mean, I know that we're getting like very nebulous and kind of far afield, but it does raise the question of why, like cui bono, who benefits from this sort of belief system when you have every permission in the world to develop your own belief system? And we would hope it would be like rational. We would hope that it would be true, but there's nobody stopping you from just sort of inventing your own philosophy of life. And so if you're going to do that, start from scratch and base it on things that make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm. Admittedly, I might be bringing something to this in the form of like, well, why are you not an atheist like me? Like, why did you reach a different conclusion? But that's also why I appreciate callers like that, because it's not just fundamentalists and atheists. And those are the two kinds of people that exist in the world, right? And so it's nice to have maybe a more nuanced discussion, of like why we end up where we do. So with that, we have a couple more super chats, and also it is time to read out. You see me like looking around my microphone. It's a very awkward little motion that I do there.
Sure. Yeah, I hit those top 5 patrons for you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, in our number 1 spot, we have Oops All Singularity. Number 2 still remains Dingleberry Jackson. 3, Kalevi Helvetti. 4, Brian Zupka. As well as number 5, J.A. Carlton. This week's honorable mention is Don Nelson.
Sweet.
So a little bit of movement in the top 5.
Yeah. Thank you to everyone who gives to us on Patreon. If you want to have your name read on the air, then please consider supporting us at tiny.cc/PatreonTH. That's tiny.cc/PatreonTH. If I say it enough like a jingle, maybe it'll stick in people's brains. I don't know. On that note, we have started recording the Talk Heathen Discord after show for all levels of paid patrons. So if you want more content and a more informal look at the host, join our Patreon today. Also, with the Talk Heathen Discord after show, you can come up and it's a much more informal, like asking us questions, not necessarily even about the stuff that was discussed on the show. We've talked about all sorts of things. And so if you just like want to know what brand of toothpaste I use, you can come and ask me. I don't know why you would want to know that, but that was the first weird question I could come up with right there. And then do you want to read out those super chats there?
Yeah, for sure. We've got some messages from some friends. Hell's Bells offers $6.66. She says, "Hi, Christy. Hi, Sofia. Awesome show. And a quick shill on my part for people to watch The Non-Profits, the flagship show. Watch all the shows, do the liking and the things. Thank you so much, Hell's Bells."
Definitely. Yeah, check out the other shows. Sorry.
Please do. Yeah. No. $2 from Nero, who says, "Beautiful pair of minds. I always love to see." A pair of minds. I'll take it. I like it.
Yeah. Love it.
Dibs on the band name. And then $5 from our friend Blind Limey, who says, "It's feeling like 500 miles of bad road. So soothing myself by watching my colleagues fight the good fight ain't so bad."
I love that.
Yeah, if you have not heard Blind Limey's Johnny Cash impression, it is well worth your time. The man's got a set of pipes, and when he starts getting sort of rocking in that country accent voice, his British accent disappears in a way that is just delightful.
I have never heard that. I didn't even know that existed, and now I feel slightly cheated. So
Chase it down. Yep, next time you see him, grab him, make him do it. It's good. It's good work.
Maybe that's something we should throw in for the March 5th fundraiser. that would be yeah, I love it. Cool. So now we have another call here that we can jump into from someone who is always someone we love. We have D, they, them, from Iowa, who says, given that people are becoming more confrontational and doing their best to be as offensive as possible, do we push back at all of them or ignore them? D, tell us about this question.
Hi, guys. It's really good to talk to you again.
Hi.
So, hearing from you.
What I wanted to, hey guys, what I wanted to do first of all is take the burden off your shoulders, Sofia, and you and Christy are so gracious, and in the face of pure dipshittery, remind us what grace is. Do not cut Clark any slack. He was on Truth Wanted on Friday and did the exact same thing. He's done the exact same thing every time I've heard him. So he's not just getting frustrated. That's what he calls to do. So don't worry. I will say it for you. He was an asshole, and thank you for dealing with him as you did.
Yeah, I know we certainly appreciate that, or I do. I worked at a psychiatric hospital and a 24-hour crisis hotline before doing any of this work, so I feel like I can be pretty unflappable. But it does sort of raise the question of, how much slack do we give, not because of our own mental health and well-being, which is a valid question and one we should all be asking ourselves routinely as we interact with the internet and family members around some of these hot button issues and whatever else. But also, like, cui bono? Like, who benefits from these conversations? Is it worthwhile? Is anybody's life made better because we sit there and endure certain forms of abuse? Or if we are willing to entertain a argument that is just sort of insulting in its premises? And I don't think it's a universal resounding no. I do think that there's value in giving people some space to tire themselves out, some space to express themselves. But yeah, increasingly it does seem like we are in a culture where outrage seems to be the objective. And, who benefits from enduring all of that?
Yeah, I feel like for me, it's been very helpful to be on this show in many ways, because I can say I'm going to engage with arguments here, but I don't have to engage with them in every aspect of my personal life if I think someone's just trying to run me down or waste my time. I think that for me, I have over time developed a lot of moments of just like, I don't really agree. Just a lot of little just moving on. Like, I'm going to note my objection here because I that's part of my values to note that not everyone agrees with that. But also not really invite more conversation, in some instances. I think there's so many, we got to keep up our energy. We got to take care of ourselves. It's a long road, man. And I, yeah, that's part of how I deal with it. Started journaling a lot more. But I also, what I realize more and more is people try to, when they're trying to get a rise out of someone or they're trying to argue in bad faith, they want oftentimes to actually cause you some kind of pain, and that it can feel like a win if you let them. But I think that that's arguing on their terms. I think that for me, I don't want to be unkind. I don't want to be nasty. And it, as funny as it can be to say little things like, that person is a dipshit. Like, in my heart, I want them to be better than they are. And I believe that that's possible for them too. And so it's a deep irony for me that a lot of the folks who try to upset me personally tend to come from a faith that they argue makes them more moral than I am. And it's this, in this weird, maybe bittersweet way, I can look at it and just be like, you know, at least I'm being Christ-like. And sort of just hold that to myself as this personal joke and satisfaction. I was joking the other day, though, we had a gathering of, you know, with the ACA, we had a gathering, like a women's group, and we were talking about how to deal with things. And I said, well, just working out so to exercise internal rage. It's not all placidity, you know?
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I like to debate biblical. I like to debate with the Bible. I like to turn the Bible around on the bigots and the you know, the misogynists and the homophobes and the, you know, that's something that I have found that I'm good at. So I still study the Bible a lot. And people like Tomas, I really appreciate debating with, because they're honest debaters. They're not haters, and they're not using their faith to justify hate. And I was just so struck by the you know, the contrast between the two callers. But then Tomas, you know, showed that, you know, he's still very much a believer too. And I was glad that you guys still challenged him on that. And I thought I just wanted to, I guess maybe I just wanted to more comment on the two sides of what I saw from you guys today, and I just am spending more time studying because I want to make more content, and well, I want to start making content, and I just really appreciate listening to folks like you, Sofia, and Christy, and the rest of the ACA folk, and it's always a privilege to be chosen to talk with you as well. So thank you guys for what you do, and I'm here for you. If you need a shoulder to cry on.
Yeah, I know, and you're in the Discord too, so I love that.
Epistemology or...
Yeah. You know, and I think that it's studying the Bible, like I still do that as well, because I do think it's important to know, you know, in the cold open, I referenced a Bible verse that I remember being a Christian and looking at the verse that says, question everything, keep what is good, and being like, why is no one looking at this one, you know, and feeling frustrated by that. Yeah. And I think that a question that I've started to wonder about a little bit, because I am at a Christian university. I think there's one other person who's actually says they are an atheist at that entire school that I've met. A couple of people say they're like spiritual or non-religious, but for the most part, fairly conservative Christian. And I think a question I've started wondering and putting out there, not putting people on the spot so much, just sort of announcing during class. It's a question I have. If you hold beliefs that I would consider homophobic, transphobic, bigoted in some way, sexist, racist, whatever it might be, and you are using your faith to justify that, if I could show you that your faith did not support it, would it be easy for you to let those beliefs go? Like, what is behind these that isn't from the faith?
Are we homophobic because of the faith, or are we homophobic in justifying it via the faith?
Yeah. And of course, the immediate answer is, of course I would. Like, you know, and of course, contending that they're not actually homophobic and all these things, right? But I think that at least it's valuable to put that question out there. Like, I believe it's possible it's forcing an underlying question that we're not always reaching when we debate. So it's become one that I lean on a little more.
Yeah. Well, I've found that the most homophobic people are the ones that say, "Well, I have friends that are gay."
Mm-hmm.
You know. But
yeah, I mean, just
anyway,
that experience of othering. I hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I think that that's often the case. I always wonder what the perspective of those gay friends would be on that. And I also feel like having any kind of friendship is not justification for a belief. You know, it's interesting that people will say, I have friends who are gay, so I can't be homophobic. And then kind of on the other hand say, well, I have friends who believe differently than I do. And it's like, so perhaps you have homophobic beliefs and one of your friends is gay, and therefore you just have a friend who believes differently than you do, in the sense that you're homophobic and they're not. You know, like, it's kind of an interesting, like, I don't know. It's a way to put the weight of justifying their bigotry on the people that they say should be their friends in spite of it, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
so
we definitely appreciate all of the support, Dee, and you kind of holding that line with us, and standing up to bullies and bigots.
Yeah. So we have another
Appreciate
call
you
we're going to
calling in.
jump to, but thank you so much for calling, and we always love hearing from you. Bye, T. Always so refreshing and nice.
Mm-hmm.
So on that, we have another caller who is Evrek, she, her. I'm going to assume that that's supposed to be spelled Oregon, not Oregon. But
We'll find out, perhaps learn about a part of the world we weren't previously familiar with.
I know, it may be Oregon. I'm not sure. If it is, I'm excited to find out. If it is meant to be spelled Oregon, as a person who is from the Pacific Northwest, largely Oregon, I will be personally a little bit offended. So, they changed it to Oregon. Haha. Okay. Yeah, sorry. That was a sidetrack. So Everick asks, do you have any reasons not to be a theist? I don't consciously think God exists, but my conviction remains. I'm wondering if there is any evidence that could make my feelings match my thoughts. So tell us about this conflict you have between feelings and thought, Everick. Am I saying Everick right?
Yeah, you're saying my name right.
Cool.
Great.
So tell us about
what's
your
on your
thoughts.
heart.
Yeah. So I've been sort of reevaluating my belief system recently, and I don't think consciously that God exists. All the evidence I've seen isn't very good, and I don't see any good reason to believe. However, the beliefs, the feelings, the way I feel internally, still matches up and is testifying, I guess, that God exists.
Sure.
So I'm wondering if there's anything to deal with that, or any reasons you would have for me to not believe.
Yeah, well, so I don't want to be pedantic about your word choice, but I think that it might actually be helpful to talk about it in these terms. When we talk about feelings, we usually aren't referring to truth claims. I feel mad, sad, glad, upset, hurt, whatever, doesn't usually refer to a thing that is or is not true. So I might encourage you to explore a little bit, not just do I want there to be a God, but maybe, do I feel sad about the possibility that I will not go to heaven? Do I perhaps feel angry about the fact that I spent my time worshiping or believing in these ideals? Do I feel hurt about the lies or the, maybe false beliefs or misconceptions that were spread to me? When you look at it in those terms, what kinds of emotions can come up, or how does that maybe help to clarify any of this issue?
Looking at it like that, I guess I feel sad. Not so much that God isn't real, but sad that I continued to believe they were for so long. A couple years ago, my family all left church except for me, and so I guess I kind of feel ashamed a little that I said I knew the truth was true when like now I'm like going back on that kind of.
Yeah. I mean, those
But I don't think
emotions
I
all
feel
make
like
sense to me.
yeah.
Yeah. I kind of want to put out there too that in a way, and this would probably not necessarily change the feelings, but a perspective that maybe I could put in there is that by not leaving when the rest of your family left, you can maybe be a little bit more sure that it's what you really believe. You know, that I don't necessarily think there needs to be shame in the feeling that you held on to it for longer and are changing your mind. I think there's a lot of strength in the fact that you chose to change your mind on your own terms. That's kind of awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can also speak from when I'm thinking about my experience. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I guess it's also partially shame because like I'll have to tell my family, my friends and stuff. And there's sort of like the social aspect of like going back on what I've been saying.
You know, honestly, you don't have to tell people till you're ready also. So you can, you know, you're leaving on your terms, you're making up your own mind. You can also tell them on your terms or share with them that you have these feelings around it. That maybe I just shared with a family member of mine recently that sometimes I find them a kind of difficult person to talk to because I'm afraid of how they'll react and that it will make me feel, you know, particular feelings about myself. Like sharing that can also matter if your family are halfway decent people, you know? And I think that can be really helpful. Like for myself, when I think about my deconversion process, I went through a very similar time period where I realized that there was something, it's very hard to shift a belief, even when you, in your mind, know that you can't really hold to it anymore. In my heart, I think for me, some of it was fear of hell. That's really hard to step aside when it's ingrained. It's this little, what if I'm going to be condemned for all of this? That was a big thing for me to get over. I think that it had been so ingrained in me that my morality, my virtue was part of faith and part of religion, that this whole new concept of myself had to come out, of a person who could choose to be moral and had to do the work of defining that and could do the work of defining that, when the message I'd always gotten was that I couldn't. Like there were reasons I was holding on. And I think a lot of it was just this, it's a burden to change, no matter what that change is sort of into or away from. And some of that burden is in the reinvention. And that's not a great bit of advice, but I totally get this hesitation. I felt it too.
Yeah, typically those feelings do fade with time. They do fade with care and attention. In some ways, they may linger, and you know it's always valuable to be intentional about working with some of these emotions, whether that's with a professional or just with a good book or whatever else. But where do you see yourself, I guess, in this process?
The process of deconverting, or just like questioning my beliefs?
Well, I guess I'm curious about what distinction you're drawing there.
The distinction I see is deconverting is kind of explicitly, like in the act of like leaving religion, where questioning your beliefs isn't necessarily like believing that they're false, but just like more critical viewpoint. I could have questioned my beliefs and came up and that is still real, but if I'm like deconverted, I'm actively like.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, Everett. I'm having a hard time following you just because of the quality of our connection right now. But just to say, I recognize that this is a non-linear path and that there are a lot of milestones in it. And coming to this sort of like intellectual belief where you are not just willing to walk away from your faith, but to like declare and like deconvert in sort of a public way, or to own that change in belief and discuss it with other people, that can be a very valuable and important milestone. But it doesn't like automatically flip a switch inside of your heart that's going to change all of these emotions. And that is okay. That doesn't mean you're doing a bad job. That doesn't mean you're bad at it. It just means that this is a process, and it's big and important. It has ties to family, ties to childhood, ties to culture and community, to some of your most intimate moments, to perhaps some of the most like profound moments of your life. So to walk away from that or to make a meaningful change here is allowed to come with some big feelings. And I hope that you'll tend to and care for those feelings rather than try to like excise them as if they don't belong.
I feel like Christy's words are so wise in this instance. And I just sort of, I might let you go because the quality of the connection is pretty spotty. But I just want to underscore all of that we are, I do like the phrase that we are feeling beings who think, not thinking beings who feel. I believe that this is such a sort of almost a twisted feeling to try to live in a society where everything has to be perfectly justified that we believe and that we feel. And I think it's okay to let yourself have quite a bit of space, as much of a meme as taking space has become lately, to deal with those things. But yeah. Looking at our time, I'm thinking that if we want to have any sort of an after show, we may go ahead and wrap it up. And that's the incentive right there to join us in the after show, to become a member and,
Sure.
and be part of the Talk Heathen Discord, is that, you can come and ask us more things and chat with us for longer. So let's see. I have to do that weird move where I like look at the thing again, because here I am.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, while you're doing that, I'll quickly hit you with a 20 euro, I believe, super chat from Cindy Plaza saying, Sofia, don't let the chat bring you down. Answering callers while enduring insults shows how amazing you are. Well,
Aw,
happy
thank
to read
you.
it. Well said.
I did teach middle school, so there is a little bit of that. Where you're just, you can't take it too personally. They're having their own. They're on their own journey,
Sure, right?
Yeah. So I do want to mention that I did say number of super chats, or amount we would have made. And I think we've very much surpassed the monetary amount of $5 super chats. So I have a song, I guess. That was where I just dove in and was like, I'll sing. I have a very short song. It's actually from the Revolutionary War. And so I know it's not under copyright anymore. Not
Sure.
copyrighted. It's like hundreds of years old now. Okay. Here's my only having drank coffee this morning song. If buttercups buzzed after the bees, if boats were on land and churches on seas, if ponies rode men and the grass ate the cows, if cats should be chased into holes by the mouse, if mamas sold their babies to brigands for half a crown, if summer were spring all the other way round, then all the world would be upside down. That's my song. I did a quick little, there was a moment in there when I realized the song actually had what I would consider a modern slur in it. So there's like a random
Cool.
replace, because I was like, oh crap, this song that I knew from my childhood.
On the fly.
Dear.
Congratulations.
So, anyway, that was an exciting moment for me. I'm like flushed a little bit. All right. So the prompt for this week is complete the sentence. It is a bad idea to follow the Bible's commandment of blank. Reply in the comments and tune in at the beginning of next week's episode to hear the top 3 answers. And we want to thank Richard for helping out today. Richard, you've been on once before. This was an exciting show. You came up, this is your second time up here.
Thomas, sorry. What a great caller he was.
Mm-hmm.
Really. I actually agree with him. He called in, and I wrote it down, the actual thing he called in with. If I can find it, Christianity is sophisticated philosophically, rationally, and morally, but it has had 2,000 years to develop those sophisticated systems. And I'd be very interested in speaking to Tomasz in the future, because throughout that call, he kept talking about Christianity. And in religious studies, we recognize that there are Christianities, not just Christianity.
Not and a single Christian tradition, but yeah, he acknowledged sort of what's heresy and what's not. But there's a lot to explore there.
Absolutely, and I'd love to go down those kind of those conversations with him. So, Tomasz, if you are listening, call back again when I am hosting.
Yes, I love that. I completely agree. Tomasz was wonderful, and yeah, give us a call when it's Richard, not me. That sounds weird to end with. Okay, I was just rambling now, but thank you, Richard. All right, so we're going to real quick the tiny.cc/ACA Discord, I'm guessing is what that's supposed to read. You can definitely join us there for the after show and become a member, do all those good things. We're going to send out some love rings. I'm remembering this time. I forget so often, but can we have love rings? Okay, I'm just going to do this. There we go. They came up. I'm just going to look like I'm swimming for a minute. Yeah, and so if you don't believe this is your community, and we appreciate you being here, if you do believe, we don't hate you.
We're just not convinced.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live, Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.